Rain masks a terrifying secret. I uncovered 3 creepy true stories that will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced as I stood before it, the whispers curling in the air around me like smoke. You might think I'd learned my lesson, sticking to my mundane routine, but curiosity has a nasty way of getting the best of me. As the rain pounded down outside, drenching the world in a chilling darkness, that door loomed there, a gateway to something I couldn't comprehend. It was just an old, creaky door in my grandmother's basement. Or so I thought. Every Thursday after school, I would go to her house. I'd walk home through the crisp autumn air, leaves crunching underfoot. It was cozy there. The smell of baked cookies filled the air, and I would sit on the couch, listening to her tales of wonder. But today was different. The house felt colder, like the warmth had seeped away. Shadows danced across the walls, mocking me. I could hear it, the low creaking of the door, urging me to come closer. When I finally stepped toward it, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't even know what I was doing there. The old wood felt like ice against my fingertips. I pushed it open, and the hinges squealed, like a warning cry. Inside, I was met with a darkness so thick it choked me. The smell of dampness wrapped around me, and suddenly, I could hear a raspy whisper emerging from that abyss. Help me! I stumbled backward, heart hammering in my chest. The remnants of what had once been filled the space, broken toys, dusty books. Each one felt heavy with secrets. A chill crept up my spine. Shadows darted around, flickering with every drop of rain that crashed against the window. Then, I heard a soft thud, a whisper of movement behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just darkness and the gnawing dread that something was there. My hands shook. The air felt thicker now, pressing against me like a weight. I was supposed to be brave, but the trembling in my knees betrayed me. I forced myself to breathe, to calm the chaos in my mind. But then I heard it again, a soft, haunting giggle that seemed to echo all around. Why was it so familiar? I turned back to the room, desperation clawing at my throat. Why hadn't I left? Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged. The darkness pressed in, and every instinct screamed at me to run. My pulse quickened. I banged on the door. Let me out. But the only answer was silence, thick and suffocating. That's when I saw a figure, standing just out of the reach of light, its eyes glimmering like shards of glass in the dark. I wanted to scream, but the sound was lodged in my throat. I could feel it moving closer. The giggle turned into a chorus of whispers, rising and falling like a chilling wind. I was trapped, breathing heavily, heart racing, frozen in terror. Then, darkness consumed me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for a moment, I was suspended in time, the echoes of that giggle deepening the void around me. My senses sharpened, I could feel the cold ground beneath my feet, the damp air that smelled of decay. But I was not alone. In that oppressive silence, I felt a presence, close enough that I could almost hear its bray, the raspy draw, heavy and deliberate. It was as if the very air was charged with static, a mingling of dread and curiosity that refused to let me leave. Instinctively, I took a step back, my trembling hands brushing against something soft and yielding. I recoiled at the contact, my heart racing as my eyes struggled to adjust to the utter darkness. I had to know what that was. Heart pounding, I reached out again, this time more deliberately, seeking closure for the nightmare that enveloped me. My fingers grazed the Surfacia doll, its face cracked and smeared with something dark. Pressing my fingertips into the filth, I felt a faint warmth beneath the doll's surface, reminiscent of life. The giggle resumed, this time disembodied and echoing even closer, wrapping around me like an invisible rope tightening its grip. "Play with me." The voice was childlike, sing-song, yet laced with an undercurrent of malice that set my teeth on edge. I gritted my jaw, forcing down my panic, pushing my back against the door to find solace in the sanctity of its wood. As I leaned against it, the door trembled slightly, not with my body weight but as if responding to something from within. Something was trying to break through, clawing at the outer edges of the unknown. My breath hitched in my throat, my back pressed against the door as my mind urged me to break the silence. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, voice trembling, barely audible against the rhythm of the rain pounding overhead. No answer. But then, a rustle. A mechanical sound that felt disturbingly familiar, and suddenly, I recalled my grandmother's stories. Tales spun with love and caution, telling of things that lurked in the edges of shadows, about children who played in the darkness long after the sun went down, children who were never truly alone. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Those weren't just stories, they were warnings. The whispers grew louder, drowning out the sound of the rain, until the cacophony morphed into elongated wails of newfound distress. I turned to the door, my voice rising in fear, "Let me out." The whispers shifted again, and suddenly, I felt them tiny hands brushing against my legs, pulling, tugging playfully yet insistently, as if demanding my attention. My heart pounded against my ribcage. I was no longer just trapped in my grandmother's basement, I was ensnared in a realm where the boundaries of life and death blurred. Wrenching my attention from the panicked whispers, I reached into my pocket, fingers searching for the small flashlight I always kept on me. It was my lifeline, a feeble hope against the smothering darkness. As I flicked it on, the beam cut through the black fog. The room snapped into focus, revealing more than just broken toys and dusty shelves. It was filled with an array of lifelike dolls, all turned towards me, their hollow eyes capturing the light in unnerving ways. Terrified, I stumbled back, and that's when I saw it again, the figure. Now, it loomed right at the edge of the beam, its face just a shrouded silhouette, with slivers of moonlight highlighting sharp features. I squinted as it morphed into something undeniably grotesque, the cracks of its skin revealing dark hollows where eyes should have been. Instead, they glimmered with some unnatural sheen, reflecting the light like dark mirrors, the laughter crescendoed, a chorus of childlike voices morphing into something more sinister. "Play with us," they beckoned, their tone shifting to an urgency that sent a shockwave of fear up my spine. Whispers filled my ears, overwhelming me with promises of fun, of companionship, yet there was something devouring just beneath the surface. With shaking hands, I pointed the flashlight at the figure, but as I did, it vanished, absorbed back into the shadows. I scrutinized the room, dread pooling in my gut. I could hear my own breathing, the echoes of the rain now more distant, fading like a memory until the dim light flickered. Before I could react, the flashlight went out, plunging me back into a darkness so absolute that I couldn't tell if my eyes were even open. I felt a pull, the cold hands tugging at my wrists, drawing me toward the center of the room, an insatiable hunger in their grasp. "Stay with us," and then, laughter erupted, filled with an intensity one had never experienced before, rattling in my bones and drowning out my desperate thoughts. My heart thudded, and before I could scream, those hands began to pull me downward, into the very floor itself. And as the whispers turned into a deafening roar, I felt my body being consumed by the ground, swallowed whole like the lingering darkness around me. I was beginning to forget myself, my thoughts disintegrating, lost in the abyss. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, I saw at Augine a sliver of light peeking through a crack above, and I could have sworn I heard my grandmother's name being called, echoing through the void, leaving me with the one thought that shattered my world. "Where are you, child?" Then, darkness claimed me once more. I blinked, fighting my instincts to ignore the pulse of agony pounding through my skull. I was lying on something cold and hard, the floor, I surmised, but the air was thick with a honed tension that constricted my lungs. Slowly, I opened my eyes, but the darkness was absolute again. I couldn't even see the outline of my own hands, much less what lay beyond. A murmur trembled just out of reach, and I strained to catch its words as they intensified into a scrabbling sound, a chorus of tiny feet pattering against the ground, darting closer with unbounded excitement. Panic surged through me. Enough! I shouted, my voice a pitiful squawk in the overwhelming darkness. The sound quickly consumed me, swallowed by the encroaching void. The laughter morphed, rising and falling, undulating like the tide pulling away before a storm. Leave me alone! I cried out again, desperation clawing at the edge of my consciousness. The world around me flickered as fleeting images resurfaced, the doll, the figure. The thought that I might be lost within the talons of a twisted imagination gnawed at my mind. I remembered the stories my grandmother told me about spirits awakened by despair, trapped in the limbo between our world and theirs. A low hum rose within the inky blackness, vibrating against my skin, whispering promises of vengeance and play beneath the surface. My broken heart quickened. I could feel the presence pressing closer, like predators stalking their prey. From the depths of my seeping terror, a specter of defiance flickered. What if I confronted the source of this horror? I'm not afraid of you, I shouted, the fire of rebellion blooming in my throat. But the laughter seized me, weaving through the shadows, weaving tighter, enveloping my very essence. I stumbled forward, disoriented. The floor shifted beneath my feet, becoming uneven and slick as if I were losing my footing atop a precipice. Something cold and damp wrapped around my ankles, dragging me backwards toward the heart of the darkness. Off. I screamed, ripping at the unseen bindings, my pulse roaring in my ears. And then silencia, heart-stopping, eerily hushed moment that flooded my senses with an impending dread. I felt a stillness, as if the world held its breath, waiting for something to snap, and then it hit me. A memory surged through the void, a vision of the old family dining table. It had once been a solid haven, tales told and laughter sharied a shield against the gathering darkness. I needed to reach it, recapture the safety it once provided. If I could only find the way back. I fumbled around in the dark, desperate for some semblance of direction, something to ground me. A doll. A broken toy. I searched until I stumbled, me leg snagged on something hard and unyielding. I reached down, fingers brushing against the jagged remnants of what felt like porcelain. The doll, a small figure with its head tilted unnaturally, one eye missing but the other fixed directly on me. Why are you looking for them? Its voice hissed in a whimper, deep and childlike, resonating with a deep echo that vibrated in my chest. Let me go, I shouted, terrified. The grip on my ankle tightened, an insidious force void of warmth, while the ghostly laughter resumed, now a tapestry of sounds, some high-pitched, others deep and gravelly, all taunting me mercilessly. Suddenly, I felt a gust of frigid air flooded around me, and I was thrust sideways, tumbling inelegantly into a wet thud. My pulse roared in my ears. I was lying against what felt like the edge of the dining table, its wood slick with mildew. Help me, I breathed, dragging my trembling fingers over the surface. But the surface began shifting beneath my touch, quivering like a heartbeat. I froze, the vibration sending ripples along my skin. The laughter faded, replaced by a deeper, sinister whisper, a voice I recognized now, the cruel undertone that sent shivers up my spine. Grandmother, it mocked, smooth as silver against rust. She never wanted you to come here. Stop. I gasped, reflexively clawing my way back from the table. I couldn't linger here, I had to escape. Desperation filled my lungs as I turned away, stumbling blindly into the bitter darkness once more, but the laughter escalated, it multiplied, and as I staggered forward, the floor buckled, swallowed by the familiar ache of despair. And then I heard it, echoing back through the corridors of my mind, the door's not the end, child. It's only the beginning. My breath quickened, and dread coiled within my stomach as the ground undulated beneath me. I was being pushed toward the threshold again, along the edge of something deeply malevolent, and the form of a shadow began to coalesce in the darkness behind me. No. I won't go back there, I screamed, struggling against the inexorable pull, but as I fought, an icy hand curled around my wrist, dragging me backward. A tight grip that refused to relent, and as I glanced back, the last remnants of light flickered, and I caught a glimpse of the figure standing behind me, its twisted smile illuminated by the dawning reality of my fate. "Welcome home, dear." Then the darkness consumed me entirely. The air crackled with malevolence, an unyielding force that sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced as I found myself lost once again in the sprawling darkness, my breath uneven and jagged, a wild rhythm against the malicious lull enfolding me. I hadn't escaped it had only paused to draw me deeper into its labyrinthine embrace. My fingers brushed against the sticky floor, trembling, seeking reassurance but finding nothing but the essence of decay and despair. "Welcome home, dear," the figure had said, its voice a dissonant melody that replayed endlessly in my mind. The words had slithered through my thoughts, tying knots of dread in my gut, a cruel reminder of the horror that awaited me. I hadn't thought of it as home. The word felt foreign, burdened with the weight of betrayal and the promise of suffering. Tentatively, I clawed my way backward, the cold wall pressing against my back. I could feel its darkness swirling like a tempest, wrapping its tendrils around me, insidious and suffocating. For a moment, I considered surrendering to despair, to the whispers that taunted me from the corners of my mind. But no something in me resisted. I had to keep moving. As if summoned by my defiance, a low rumble shook the ground beneath me, reverberating like distant thunder. The laughter returned, a cacophony of derision that unsettled my very soul. It twisted and spiraled, filling the empty void like a swarm of insects, their wings a sinister hum dancing around my ears. I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to block out the infuriating sound, but the laughter only grew. The darkness was alive, breathing with malevolent intent. I gathered the remnants of my courage and pushed off the wall, reaching for the ever-elusive table once more. Each step unearthed a thick tension that clawed at my flesh like nails tearing through skin. I moved in a cautious crouch, navigating a treacherous terrain of an unseen landscape, one that pulsated with hidden dread. My hands grazed splintered wood and slick surfaces, a journey through a cemetery of forgotten memories. With every inch, it felt as if I were stalking closer to the heart of a malignancy that sought to consume me. Just as I was regaining my bearings, a sharp snap echoed through the darkness, followed by a rhythmic ticking sound that echoed like a clock, unrelenting and insistent. The very air changed, electrified with anticipation, as I noticed the gradual emergence of a dim glow in the distance. Shapes twisted and writhed along the walls, dark phantoms entangled in the reaching shadows that slithered like serpents. Despite the instinctual urge to run, curiosity dragged me toward the light. The closer I approached, the more I felt tethered to it, a beacon in the bleak that promised either salvation or an unfathomable despair. The light flickered and danced, revealing the outlines of grotesque figures painted onto the walls, each image telling a story more nightmarish than the last. Then I recognized one unmistakable figure, my grandmother, grinning with a false warmth, hands outstretched to welcome me, but her eyes burned with a hellish brightness that pierced through the dark. "Why did you come back?" she cooed, the sweetness of her voice dripping with a rancid undertone. "You came searching for secrets. Aren't you excited to unveil the truth?" Her words twisted through my mind, and beneath them lay a hideous undercurrent I couldn't quite grasp. I turned, heart hammering, to find myself retreating away from the light, but darkness rushed to engulf me with an intensity that stole my breath. "No! No!" I shouted, the desperation creeping into my voice. I could almost hear the sound of my own heart pounding against the chaos surrounding me, drowning in a desperate rhythm. As I stumbled backward, the figures in the shadows seemed to shift, their limbs stretching and contorting into grotesque shapes. A flick of movement caught my eye, a glimmering object nestled within the maw of the darkness. I scrambled toward it, fueled by hope and dread in equal measure, until my fingers clenched around the cold metallic surface of what felt like an old key, a key designed for one of the many locked doors that awaited me. Just as I turned it over in my palm, the laughter swelled once more, drowning out the throbbing silence that had befallen everything around me. "You're never truly alone," the whispers slithered, "not while they are here, watching, waiting." That I gripped the key tightly, my knuckles whitening as I spun on my heel. Determined, I pressed into the restless darkness, ready to unearth whatever lay hidden in the sinister depths. But with every step, the landscape of shadows morphed. Ghostly limbs reached for me, voices taunted meth sound of children's laughter intertwined with sinister growls, each note twisting deeper into my psyche, and then, before I could even comprehend the terror of it, lights flickered violently around me, stabbing through the gloom. I stumbled and fell, the key slipping from my grasp as I crashed onto the floor, scrambling for purchase. The moment before the darkness consumed me, a chilling realization struck my heart. An echo of cries clawed their way up from the depths, a harrowing chant from twisted voices that pooled around me, rising in a crescendo. "They're coming for you," and then, all the light vanished, as if the world had been snuffed out, leaving me alone in a murky void where every breath came with the weight of their anticipation. The silence that followed was deafening, a smothering blanket that cocooned me in the unfathomable dark. My heart thudded violently in my chest, each beat reverberating like a drum summoning something equally terrible. There was a newness to the dark, a suffocating bearing that hinted at the forms surrounding my living, breathing nightmares that loomed just beyond the periphery of my sanity. As I lay sprawled on the cold floor, fear intertwined with an inexplicable pull. The air thickened, pregnant with portentous expectation, and I could swear I sensed the flicker of eyes upon me, watching, waiting for the right moment to pounce. I pushed myself up, fingers probing through the unending gloom until the outline of the key brushed against my palm, a momentary tether to reality. "Find us," a voice cooed from just behind me, watery and ethereal, like liquid shadow pouring into my ears. I spun around, the emptiness echoing my fear, but only the silence answered, thick, oppressive, and hungry for blood. Instinct screamed at me to flee, to abandon this nightmarish space, but a deeper instinct pulled me forward, deeper into the maw of despair. There was something hidden here, lying in wait. Something that craved the light of discovery and thrived on the courage of those who dared venture deeper. With the key clutched tightly in my hand, I treaded cautiously, each step punctuated by the spectral sound of my breath swallowed by darkness. A chill coursed through the air, and as if responding to my fear, a low growl emerged from the shadows, a sound too cultivated to be pure threat, too purposeful to be benign. Instinctively, I turned, half expecting to see some grotesque apparition bearing down on me. Instead, shadows stretched over a nearby wall, a multitude of shapes swirling together as if they were painting a twisted narrative on the canvas of darkness. Little hands reached out from the contours, tiny fingers grasping for something unseen, a wretched family of ethereal beings, their eyes aglow with a yearning that sent a fresh wave of nausea rushing through me. "Unlock us," they whispered in collective harmony, voices a ghostly echo drowning out my sanity. Before I could comprehend the madness swirling around me, the key grew warm in my hand, pulsing with an energy that was both terrifying and alluring. I turned to survey the void, and there it was, a door emerging from the abyss, its surface crawling with the essence of years long lost. The keyhole glimmered malevolently, mocking my uncertainty. What awaited me behind that door? The luring promise of answers beckoned, yet warning bells clanged, a cacophony that drowned out even the whispered pleas of the lost souls. Was it my grandmother? Or had her essence coalesced into something every bit as damned? I stepped forward, heart pounding in desperate anticipation, and inserted the key. It fit perfectly, a smooth transition that sent reverberations of dread curling through my bones. As I turned it, the lock released with a sharp click, echoing like thunder, an invitation laced with seduction and danger. Suddenly, the darkness erupted around me, cascading shadows spilling forth like molten ink. My heartbeat pounded in feverish anticipation, and just as the door swung open, a blinding light streamed through. I shielded my eyes, gasping for breath as cacophony erupted from the threshold, a morbid symphony of screams battling against the joyous laughter of the children. And then, in an instant, as my vision adjusted, I was hit by a wave of horror. I stood on the precipice of a nightmare unfolding. Rows of abandoned toys lined the periphery of what appeared to be a child's playroom, simultaneously welcoming and malevolent. Crayons and dolls lay strewn about like forgotten memories, collecting dust, while the walls pulsed with distorted imagery. Children playing, laughing, but their faces were blurred, stretched grotesquely into silent screams. My gaze fell upon the center of the room, a towering, antique mirror with shadowed flecks swirling just beneath its surface. Within its boundaries, reflections danced me, mother, my father, and then my grandmother's face materialized, all trapped in an ongoing cycle of torment that echoed the same question: why did you come back? Just then, the mirror rippled violently, and the whispers crescendoed into a fever pitch. "Join us!" they cried, and the grotesque laughter of my family melded with the cries of the ghosts around me, an unsettling harmony inviting me to step through the glass. Heart racing, mind reeling, I edged toward the mirror, and suddenly, a pair of tiny, slick hands grasped my ankles, cold and clammy. My heart plummeted as a horde of children crawled from the darkness, their mouths stretching into grinning smiles filled with glistening teeth. "Stay with us forever!" And just as the world began to unravel around me, the mirror cracked, splintering light into a kaleidoscope of horror, each jagged piece reflecting a terrified fragment of me, each one a potential direction leading to my doom, and the laughter grew louder, ringing in my ears, drowning out everything else, until all I could hear was the unsettling hum that promised one thing: escape would never be an option. A cold draft swept through the room, twisting around me like a serpentine spectre, rattling the remnants of courage I clutched to my chest. The laughter, sharp and electrifying, echoed off the walls, morphing into a cacophony of jeering voices. It was as if every forgotten toy, every shadowy form, had joined in a haunting symphony set to ensnare me. I recoiled, pulling my foot from the grip of the clammy hands. Free for a moment, I turned to run, but the children's laughter turned sinister, wrapping around me like chains of despair. "Why can't you stay?" they sang, voices threading through the air, weaving a tapestry of promises and threats. I stumbled backward, eyes darting across the room, seeking a way to escape the enraptured playroom as the surreal mirror loomed ahead, its surface thickening like a storm brewing in the distance. Intense dread surged through my body, and instinct propelled me toward the door I had so foolishly opened. Yet, as I turned, the very air grew viscous, resisting me, pulling me closer to the heart of this festering chaos. The visage of my family shimmered defiantly in the mirror, their expressions twisted in a grotesque dance of longing and despair. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, something shifted, a shadow that flickered and flared like a candle caught in a gale. I turned, my breath hitching as a figure emerged from the darkness, standing tall amidst the chaos. It was a woman, her hair black as the void, flowing down her back like inky tendrils. Her mouth curled into a sinister smile, and a chill rushed over me as she locked her piercing gaze onto mine. "Don't run, you may hurt yourself," she whispered, the words coiling with an otherworldly allure that resonated deep within me. "We have waited so long for you." I stood frozen, caught between the claws of the pushing darkness and the beckoning warmth of the woman's voice. My heart ignited with terror, yet an inexplicable yearning pulled me forward, whispering that she was the key to understanding this nightmare. Behind her, the children twisted into ghastly expressions of glee and despair. They were waiting for something. "For me. What do you want?" I managed to ask, my own voice barely a whisper against the tempest rising inside me. The woman's smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp for comfort. "What do you want? That's the real question. Isn't it time you stopped resisting?" Before I could fully grasp her words, the children scurried closer, their fingers clawing at the edges of my consciousness like barbs digging deeper. A sense of panic flooded through me. His was not a simple game, not just a playful childhood haunt. This was a trap, a writhing pit of broken dreams and lost souls yearning for release. "Join us!" the chorus echoed once more, and in that moment, the world collapsed, edges fraying into a realm where my fear blurred with their laughter, where my life could easily become a mere thread in their tapestry of despair. Drawing upon every ounce of will, I spun back toward the door, feeling the weight of eyes on my back and cold breaths against my neck. I stumbled, finding the threshold ajar, as if mocking my hesitation, leading me into a quiet street veiled by the mist, the outside world unrecognizable, foreign, warped, but behind me, the laughter transformed into wails, heartbreak surging through the room. I risked a glance back at the mirror, now glowing with an unholy radiance, the reflection of my family urging me to enter, to succumb, their voices blending into a haunting melody of sorrow. They reached out, fingers stretching through the glass, while the children crowded around the edges of the room, each one harboring a grin that belied their true intentions, a plea shrouded in an eerie charm. "Take their place," the woman urged, stepping closer, her gossamer form swaying against the currents of darkness. The shadows danced on her skin, a living canvas of pain and laughter, intertwining in an exquisite horror. In that moment, resolve fought against terror, my heart waged war as I stood on the precipice of choice. My surroundings pulsated with a new rhythm, a desperate call to act, to leap into the unknown, and as my foot moved forward, I heard the faintest whisper a name. My grandmother's name, echoing from beyond the door, the veil between realms trembling. And then, everything froze. The laughter halted, the chattering whispers silenced as if the universe itself held its breath. The world dimmed, shadows yawning wider until they threatened to consume everything in their path, and the woman's eyes flashed with something far from human, a glimpse into the abyss, promising secrets not meant for me to unveil. Suddenly, with a chilling crack, the mirror shattered into 1,000 sharp shards, each fragment reflecting a world ensnared in darkness. A scream erupted from the depths of my memory, the sound both mine and not mine, swirling into a vortex as my remaining strength slipped away. All at once, I was being pulled back into the grasp of the children, into the cold, welcoming arms of the shadowed figure, and as the last shard of glass fell silently to the floor, I realized the terrible truth. They were more than a vision, they were a twisted piece of me. The room quivered, and a storm of laughter erupted as the darkness leapt, ready to claim its prize as the echoes of my own scream threaded through the air. And everything faded to black, or did it? Just before the darkness swallowed me whole, I felt the crack of glass under my feet, the remnants of a world I once knew forever lost, forever haunting. The darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, but even as I was consumed, the echoes of laughter lingered, a relentless reminder of the horrors that brushed against my consciousness. I twisted in the void, desperate to escape the cold hands that tugged at my frayed thoughts, only to find myself standing in a desolate alley, dimly lit by the flickering streetlights. The shadows receded but never fully vanished. They loomed between the pools of yellow light, eagerly waiting for something. Panic gripped me. I was back in the real world, yet it felt wrong, tainted. With each step away from that haunting place, I could feel traces of their essence clinging to me, faint whispers of sorrow that seeped into the cracks of my sanity. I glanced behind, expecting to see the looming figure or the children's twisted silhouettes, but there was nothing but the desolation of the midnight street and the eerie silence that echoed deeper than the shadows that I walked with a gait marred by dread, every sound amplified in the hushed air, the clack of my shoes against the pavement, the rustle of leaves drifting like lost souls, and a soft, persistent whisper carried by the wind. It taunted me, almost rhythmic, sinking with the rapid beat of my heart. Stay with us. The words, though airy, rooted themselves deep within my soul, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I shook my head and pressed forward, drawn toward the faintest glimmer of hope, the lights of my neighborhood. But each street corner revealed darker shadows than I could bear. The night deepened, suffocating me in thick, unnatural fog, taking me back toward the memories I hoped were behind me. My grandmother's name rang in my ears, a bell tolling for salvation and yet warning of impending doom. I could almost see her lovingly wrinkled face, could almost feel the warmth of her embrace, but her image was forever tinged with sorrow. I hurried to my childhood home, a place where I had felt so safe, yet now I sensed a different kind of presence. Something watched from within, and as I approached, my heart pounded a dizzying rhythm of dread. When I stepped across the threshold, the world shifted. The familiar creaks of the old wooden floor were warped, twisted into the plaintive echoes of something far more sinister. I froze, breath hitching, as shadows stretched across the walls like skeletal fingers of smoke. The air buzzed with anticipation, pulling me toward the living room where the light flickered, revealing horrifying visions. My childhood toys lay sprawled across the floor, scattered like relics of a past life, but now they were alive, eyes twinkling with a malevolence that unsettled me to my core. Each bear, doll, and car seemed imbued with a pulsating energy, watching me, judging me. The laughter I had escaped from wrapped around me again, weaving a tapestry of joy that felt utterly devoid of warmth, the life in it purely parasitic. Come play with us, a broken whisper came from the corner, almost childlike but slipping into a grotesque pitch. I turned to see a tattered rag doll sitting propped against the edge of the couch, its button eyes glimmering with dark delight. The doll tilted its head, and though its fabric mouth did not move, I felt its words crawl into my mind. We've been waiting just for you. In a surge of adrenaline, I turned away and sprinted toward the front door, but it was no longer ajar. It stood heavily against the wall, alive, and it shrieked with frustration as I pressed my palms against it. The laughter escalated into a frenzy around me, and the toys seemed to shift, creeping closer on their stitched limbs. Desperately, I clawed at the door, the handle twisting cruelly in my hand, yet no force would allow me passage. Shadows grew thicker, coiling around my ankles and tugging me backward, the whispers turning into a sinister chant, join us, as the darkness pressed into my vision. The rag doll laughed, its laughter echoing like a thunderclap in my mind. I could feel the weight of their anticipation, this malignant force that thrummed like a heart, desperate to bring me deeper into their world. But then I noticed Ida glint at the corner of the living room, a sharp flash reflecting from the edges of a jagged mirror, unearthed from a forgotten corner. The cracked surface pulsed, rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand, and through the chaos, a face appeared, a familiar face, smiling yet distorted, my grandmother, reaching out to me with pleading eyes. Help me, help us, she cried, and in that moment the mirror shattered, splintering into hundreds of reflective shards that twisted and warped everything around me, fracturing reality into a million morbid reflections of terror and despair. The shadows seized upon my hesitation, leaping forward to engulf me entirely, and I felt myself being pulled not just into the depths of darkness but also into those shattering pieces of glass, into a realm where nothing would remain sacred or intact. Just then, through the cacophony of laughter and screams, I heard my own voice shouting, pleading, but it was distorted, melding into the wailing chorus, "Who are you?" I gasped, but before I could rationalize the overwhelming dread, the shadows surged, and I was forced forward, a breath away from oblivion, the amusement of those terrible children blending with my grandmother's cries in a melody that would haunt my very existence. And then, in a blinding instant, I fell headlong into a world turned upside down, the darkness beneath ready to consume me whole, and the last thing I perceived was the sound of a familiar heartbeat, echoing alongside my own, a haunting reminder that this nightmare was only just beginning. I plummeted through the void, surrounded by the cacophony of my grandmother's cry and the children's laughter, until I landedno, crashed onto a cold, stone floor that felt as ancient as time itself. The impact disregarded all sense of subtlety, slamming the breath from my lungs and casting my vision into a haze of darkness. My heart thudded violently in my chest, sinking with the echoing laughter that seemed to weave through the very walls around me. As my eyes adjusted, shapes began to materialize in the shadows, their edges obscured by a persistent gloom. The room was vast, stretching endlessly before me with towering walls draped in tattered fabric that swayed as if alive. An unfathomable weight pressed down on my chest, and in the oppressive silence, I could hear the faint tick of a clock, each chime holding a dreadful promise, heavy with loss and regret. My pulse quickened as I scanned my surroundings, my instincts screaming that I was not alone. Faint figures jutted from the shadows, a grotesque assembly of distorted faces, flickering between fleeting normalcy and something horrifyingly inhuman. They loomed with mouths stretched in delighted grins, a twisted reflection of the once innocent children I had escaped. Stay with us forever, they whispered, their voices a chorus of hollow echoes that sent shards of ice spiraling down my spine. I staggered back, the reality of my situation sinking deeper into my bones, resonating with unrelenting dread. This was not merely a nightmare, it was a waking horror, and I was the lone spectator caught in its malignant embrace. To my left, a doorway beckoned, framed by a soft glow that flickered like dying embers. I felt an invisible pull toward it, whispering of sanctuary and escape. Yet, as I approached, the floor beneath me began to shift, the cold stone warping into undulating flesh, writhing and twisting like a wounded creature. I stumbled back, horrified as my foot sank into a grotesque mass, exposed bones rising to the surface, clawing at my ankles as if trying to drag me down into their suffering. I yanked my leg free, hyperventilating as I felt them, the disembodied fingers of lost souls, tugging for release. The air filled with the stench of decay, a miasma that clawed at my throat and threatened to choke me. With newfound desperation, I sprinted toward the glowing doorway, heart racing as I felt the shadows reaching out, yearning to pull me back into their suffocating darkness. I could hear their whispers growing louder, filling my mind with promises of ecstasy mixed with the raw terror of unending solitude. As I burst through the doorway, the world outside was indistinguishable from the hell I had just fled. I found myself in a long, narrow corridor lined with darkened mirrors, each reflecting fragments of a chaotic existence I couldn't recognize. The reflections were not just mine, other faces, contorted in fear and longing, melted into the glass, urging me to join them, to lose myself in their unending despair. Make it stop. Please. Their silent screams clawed at my sanity, and I took off, racing down the corridor, desperate to escape their clawing grasp. But the deeper I ran, the more the corridor shifted, walls undulating, twisting, and turning. I had entered a labyrinth that seemed to mock my every attempt to escape, and then I spotted an ornate door at the end of the hallway, framed by an emerald glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. I charged toward it, but as I reached out for the handle, it swung open of its own accord, revealing a room soaked in shadow but lit with an otherworldly luminescence. Inside, the shadows writhed, taking form as the bereaved faces of children, their eyes pools of sorrow coated in an unsettling veneer of mirth. I was trapped, with no retreat, as soft whispers teased me from every corner. Stay with us forever, they chorused, the sound weaving into the very fabric of my existence, rooting me in place. In that instant, the weight of grief they carried crushed against my heart. It was a wave of profound desolation that felt familiar yet overwhelmingly alien. I stumbled back, but instead of finding my footing, I felt the floor give way beneath me, no longer solid ground but an abyss inviting me into its fold. The children began to dance, their laughter rising into a haunting symphony that drowned out my fear. Facing the swirling depths before me, I took one last glance at their smiling faces, the extent of their twisted joy pulling me in with an unyielding force. The shadows whispered secrets laced with madness. I was on the brink, teetering at the precipice of oblivion, my fate intertwining with their eternal torment. Just as I prepared to leap into the void or succumb to their inviting embrace, I heard a crack sharp and chilling like shattered glass shattering the silence. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, to find the jagged pieces of the shattered mirror scattered around me, poised to reflect the twisted reality I had tried to escape, and in the fragments I saw them. The faces of the children dancing not only with dismay but with anticipation, beckoning me into their world of eternal play, their smiles widening. Join us, they urged, the darkness swelling, and I felt myself shift, teetering on the brink of both choice and damnation. A child's voice echoed cacophonously, the laughter morphing into a chilling chant, one of us. Then the floor beneath me gave way entirely, and I plunged into the endless dark. Me screams swallowed by the abyss, anchoring me in the inescapable terror that awaited below. The descent was disorienting, a whirlpool of darkness that tugged relentlessly at my consciousness. Just as despair began to seep into my bones, I landed with a soft thud, surrounded not by the cold stone I had expected, but by an odd texture, damp and warm like the flesh of a living creature. A frigid breeze slithered through the air, swirling around me and lifting the veil of silence just enough for me to hear whispers, faint yet insistently luring. Slowly, I propped myself upright, heart thumping like a war drum. I was enveloped in a cavernous space illuminated by flickering torches that cast jumping shadows along the damp walls. The flickers beckoned, inviting yet deceitful, as if warning me of the waiting horrors. Before I could gather my bearings, I noticed them, strange, grotesque forms lurking just beyond the reach of the torchlight, their elongated, bony fingers scraping along the stone floor, drawing labyrinthine lines in a chalky substance that glimmered with a sickly sheen. Their eyes gleamed with shades of anger and sorrow, simmering like molten glass. Each time their gaze met mine, it sent a chill spiraling down my spine, suffocating any rational thought. Welcome, came a chilling voice, curling around my senses like smoke. The figures stepped forward, revealing distorted features twisted into warped masks of mirth. We've been waiting for you. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but the corridor behind me had morphed into a yawning maw, the walls pulsating as though they were alive. It felt as if I had been devoured, swallowed whole by the very darkness that had taunted me moments ago. Desperation clawed at my throat. Please, I gasped, I just want to go home. Instead of retreating, the figures moved closer, their bodies weaving together like strands of a grotesque tapestry. Home is here, they sang softly, their voices weaving together like a sinister lullaby, punctuated by that dreadful laughter echoing from the shadows. The air thickened with memories, distant and untamed. I caught flashes of laughter interspersed with screams, caught between joy and terror in a perpetual cycle. I felt the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me. Their faces twisted but pleading begged for recognition, for release from the loop of torment they inhabited. I glanced back toward the flickering torches, where the shadows grew restless, threatening to engulf me. That refined fracture of darkness beckoned above the figures, a new abyss that screamed louder than the previous one. Join us, become one, the chorus chanted, voices dense with syrupy sweetness that seeped into my mind. With every heartbeat, the feeling of despair transformed into an inexplicable longing, as if threads were tethering my essence to theirs, pulling me irrevocably toward the pit of darkness above. But as I struggled, I noticed something more horrific, a flicker of hope within their chaos. Lingering within their smiles were memories of innocence, of what once had been. A glimpse of their former selves, children that once played in a sunlit field, eyes shining bright. Before I could grasp this revelation, the figures lunged, their movements disturbingly fluid, claws reaching toward me, drawing closer as they clawed at the fraying edges of my own sanity. I crouched, instinctively raising my arms to shield myself, yet every backward step into the void above felt like stepping into a more profound darkness. Embrace your truth, one figure hissed, a glare piercing through the fright. The shimmering chalky substance on the ground began to pulse, drawing my attention. Suddenly, patterns coalesced into frantic designs, forming faces I recognized. My grandmother's visage emerged from the chaos, twisted with sorrow and fear, merging with those of the children. "Help us!" she cried, the rawness of her voice knocking the breath from me once more. "They won't let us go." I felt the blood drain from my face as the realization washed over me. This wasn't merely a pit of despair, it was a tethering ground, a prison for lost souls bound by the tragedy of existence. Me grandmother and those children, they were intertwined in a network of regret, stuck in a loop of seeking escape where none existed. The laughter echoed once more, pure and taunting, ripping through my mind as the figures closed in. With a sudden rush, the world around me warped, the shimmers in the ground tilting into a vortex that seemed to deepen with every breath. No. I screamed, but the shadows surged forward, the sound of their laughter drowning out my protests, dragging me down with them as I fell toward both my grandmother and the fractured reflections of lost children. Days, months, or even years of despair pooled together in that moment, and as I reached out to my grandmother, her eyes filled with dying hope and sorrow, something broke beneath me. "Join us," the facets whispered again, and as my fingers grazed the surface of her reality, the very fabric of time unraveled, spiraling into chaos as I felt the world shudder beneath me. Just then, the ground split open, shadows erupting with other entities erupting much darker, more sinister, shredding at the seams of our tragedy. In an instant, I was left suspended between domains, caught in the web of whispered secrets and clamorous shadows. But then, above the cacophony and despair, I heard something hoarsey, thin, high-pitched giggle from the darkness, distinctly separate from those around me. It was childish, sweet yet full of a bone-chilling malice, and as I turned toward the source, I saw a small figure emerge cloaked in shadows, grinning wide through the darkness, eyes gleaming like broken glass. "Are you ready for the game?" it asked, and in that moment, the ground beneath my feet pulled apart as the ruptured abyss deepened further than I thought possible. The horror was not over, this was just the beginning. I awoke, soaking in the remnants of confusion as a dull throbbing in my head echoed my disorientation. The insidious shadows lingered, crawling up the walls of my consciousness, teasing, beckoning, like sirens singing their deceitful lullabies. Somehow, I was back. It was the same dark realm that had entangled me so thoroughly before. The laughter had faded into an eerie silence so thick you could taste it, but I could still feel it lingering beneath the surface, a twisted rhythm thrumming along with the pulse of dread at the nape of my neck. As I struggled to sit up, a single beam of spectral light sliced through the murkiness. Its origin remained hidden, tantalizing, and horrifying. Before I could take in my surroundings entirely, the voice returned, clear and anxious, resonating with a malice restricted only by my imagination. "Welcome back," it chirped, and I froze. The childlike tone transported me to a playground of horrors where laughter morphed into gasps, and every game played came with an unforgiving price. In the dim halo cast by the light, shapes began to dance, figures, disfigured and grotesque, flitting just beyond reach. I was engulfed in the sound of whispers, a cacophony of desperate voices blending into a singular plea: "Join us." Panic surged as I struggled to stand. Glancing around, I spotted them, the children from before, their expressions fixed in rapture, trapped in their play yet orbiting a malevolence that was palpable, but it wasn't just children, I recognized those features twisting within the group. Faces emerged, me grandmother among them, her gaze a haunting reflection of fear mixed with something else, something deeper. They reached for me with skeletal hands, mouths forming unspoken promises that chilled me to the core. I couldn't comprehend the horror. What had they become? Help! I shouted, desperation snaking its way into every word. What do you want from me? The playful giggle echoed again, twisting around the words, mocking the sincerity of my plea. Play with us. It is fun. They sang, shadows stretching to envelop me, teasing at the edges of my sanity. Suddenly, a memory ignited, an ember piercing the dense fog of despair. My grandmother had recounted the tales of a sibling bond, of her deepest regret, a forbidden game under the willow tree, a curse that sprouted from the joy of youth. You set them free. Her voice echoed in a haunting reminder of consequences. I had thought those memories were merely cautionary tales until now. No. I gasped, stumbling backward, but the ground trembled, the darkness writhed, refusing to relinquish its hold. I won't join you. But the giggles morphed into something chilling, a cacophony of distorted mirth erupting from the shadows. Your joy is our joy. You are one of us now. With a sudden ferocity, the children lunged, and the shadows coalesced, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. And in that moment, I understood, every question erupted in clarity. This was not just a game, this realm was a mirror of my deepest fears, and together with the lost souls who swirled around me, I belonged to something far more profound. The incessant laughter enveloped me in waves, a siren call that intertwined with my very essence. As the echoes of distorted joy consumed my thoughts, a flicker of fear reminded me of what was at stake. If I play, I whispered, offering a desperate trade, I can set you free. The children stopped, momentarily halted mid-dance, their eyes wide, gleaming with an insatiable hunger. With a nod, they surrounded me, a ring of shadows tinged with fleeting innocence and the essence of every lost soul I had encountered. One last game, they cooed, their voices intertwining like an eerie lullaby, and then the forever. The air crackled with anticipation, and before I could process the desperation of my intended sacrifice, the darkness surged, swallowing the last remnants of my hesitations. And what game shall we play? I barely managed to ask, knowing the weight of my choice could never be undone. Hide and seek. They shrieked, the chorus ringing in eerie delight. But you must find us, before we find you. The shadows darted, swirling to obscure shapes and pulling tighter around me, and as they threatened to merge once more into the clutch of oblivion, one last horrifying thought cascaded over me, but not all of you will be found. The reality struck like lightning. For every child's laughter echoing in the dark, there rested a malignant truth that some shadows could never return. All the laughter, all the games, were mere curtains draping over the grotesque truth, that once an innocent soul was played with in this nightmarish realm, it could not escape. Just as I prepared to shroud myself in the madness, the light returned with a vengeance, a clean, harsh illumination that mirrored despair. I realized too late that I was not the seeker, I was merely the bait, luring them close enough to take back what once belonged to them. You're never truly alone, I whispered to myself, the gnawing realization seeping in, echoing inside my mind. I saw the figure emerge against the oppressive shadows, my grandmother's silhouette amid a swirling cyclone of darkness. She stretched her hands towards me once again, but this time, there was grief more profound than I could anticipate, an unbreachable chasm between longing and escape. She echoed the last unresolved question that haunted the air, where are you, child? And beneath, all I could do was watch as the children encircled, and we began to dance, spiraling into darkness like leaves caught in a tempest, released from the tired yoke of every unsung truth. As I twirled, I thought I caught my grandmother's gaze, a mix of forgiveness and loss, as I faded further into the haunting embrace of shrouded voices that echoed through the corridors of the eternal night. Join us, they sang sweetly, and as the darkness licked its lips, I realized this cruel game would never end, leaving me with a lingering thought, because I was never meant to be found.